My name is Lynda Kazairwe, and I am a mother of three boys, three lovely boys. The first is 8, and the second will be 6 in about 3 weeks, no, 4 weeks. And I will have a 4-year-old and their father. We live in Connecticut, and my sons go to school. One starts 4th grade and 1st grade, and the last one, the baby, is not so much of a baby anymore. He's 4. He is starting preschool. No, he's not starting, he's continuing preschool. Yeah. So when I had my son, who's 4 years old, you know, it was a regular pregnancy, regular birth. I don't know, that sounds right. It was, you know, a regular pregnancy. I was as tired as I was before with my other pregnancies. It was, I had him what felt like close to his older brother. So I was just really tired from having two toddlers, and then I had him. So the pregnancy was just really tiring, but I did everything I'm supposed to do, you know, all the doctor's visits, all the scans, nothing prepared us. So we had him, and at his 4 weeks appointment, we got, you know, if it was like giving, you know, clean bill of health, there was nothing that pointed at this, even at his 4 weeks appointment. At that point, I had my 2 older sons in the warm-up periods, and they were really fussy, colicky babies. And so they cried a lot, they were active, and, you know, I thought, oh, they hated clothes. So the one who was born in the summer, the 8-year-old, actually literally lived in diapers, no shirt. So I thought that, you know, maybe because it's the cold season, he likes to snuggle or just lie down and sleep, you know, and he was bundled up a lot because it was March. So it was a bit cold still. And so I thought, you know, oh, I was actually thanking God that, oh my God, I have a baby who is like quiet. He cries and, you know, cries when he's hungry, but he wasn't loud. He wasn't as loud as his brothers. And I was so grateful for that. I just felt like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. But then I think his father mentioned after the 4 weeks appointment, you know what, he seems to be, you know, kind of lethargic. So I was like, yeah, I had noticed, but then I'd been trying to explain it to myself. And then my niece mentioned it, and then his father said, you know what, let's just go back to the doctor. And I had all the excuses. No, it's going to take too long to get an appointment. He's fine. We literally just saw the doctor, but he just had a feeling. And then we went back. And when we went, we found a different PID in because it wasn't a scheduled visit. And after a physical exam, he said, I think you need to go through the AR at the hospital. You need to go, you know, emergency. I've made preparations for you. Please go now. And I was just like, what? We had all these plans for the rest of the afternoon. I said, you know, can we come back tomorrow? He said, I'd really rather that you went now. It was a she, actually. And so we ended up, you know, rushing through the ER, and I'm making calls, and I don't even know what I'm calling about. I'm just like, they've sent us for tests, and it sounds serious, and everybody has a serious face. And then we went to the hospital, and we ended up, you know, being kept overnight. And that experience was not good. It was quite, it's one of the worst experiences that we've had. And I mean, he's 4. We've had really, you know, very bad experiences with illnesses and what, but that in particular was not good because I felt like we were not given enough information and question, and they didn't seem to receive our questions very well. And we're almost being told, wait, we'll tell you, but you can tell that there's tension. You can tell that something serious is going on. Eventually we are told that, you know, he has spinal muscular atrophy, type 1, most likely. And a lot of words were thrown at us really, really fast. And there were new words, there were new things. And then so many people came to see us in like, I mean, I was falling apart and I just didn't know what is happening. And we had all this information come at us really, really fast. And so that was very uncomfortable. That was very hard. So we got this diagnosis. We got a call from a doctor a neurologist at the hospital who wasn't there, who we didn't speak to, and he said he had seen that we'd been admitted and got this diagnosis, and he'd like to speak. So at this point, we got into a clinical trial, or we got into the process of getting into one, and it was still a lot. I still was, but I was still processing all this and going through so much confusion. But we were able to get into that, and so at 10 weeks old, he got gene therapy. And then we had to go for monthly visits and all the things that come with it. He started to get ill towards his first birthday, I think, or maybe after 6 months. We found out he had needed a shunt because of hydrocephalus, non-communicating hydrocephalus, and then the respiratory illnesses started to come much later. And those were such a drag, to say, putting it lightly. But that's how we found out about his diagnosis. And then we started getting all these treatments and seeing all these specialists. And the specialists that we saw eventually were really good. That was such a pleasant experience. It was difficult, but it was good. They were doing their best to be calm, to explain things slowly, to make sure we understood, to follow up. So that I really, really appreciate. Up to date, we're still in touch with so many of them, and send updates. Even when he got respiratory illnesses, the older doctors were always very kind and helpful in, walking us through the processes. And so fast forward, I wasn't working, but I had a baby who had so many needs and so many movements. So it almost felt like we were either in the hospital for a respiratory illness, and we stayed for almost in the PICU for as long as 60 days at a time. And there's just so much happening. So I wasn't able to take care of my older children at that time because I just didn't have the support around me. So they lived with my family back home. And that was difficult separation, but it was necessary. I would never have made that choice, but it was the best thing for them. Otherwise, I'd be denying them, a childhood. I'd be denying them life, and they seem to have loved the experience. They love the whole travel. They would travel to see me. So we had those periods of time, and I was constantly worried that I wasn't doing the right thing by them, that they were growing and they might resent me at a certain point for not being there for them. So it was being torn into all. I'm more introverted. And so a lot of the information we were getting at that point was, join this Facebook group, join this community, join this, and getting on those groups wasn't always helpful. Anyway, no, I'll be straight. It wasn't helpful for me. And I know many people actually thrive because they're able to to get that sense of community. So I think everybody needs to find what works for them. Because that didn't work for me, I sort of pulled back completely because I just didn't know how to have those conversations. And then some of, even now I'm not on the groups, but some of the, when you're not in the right mental state, it can be overwhelming and it can be even more scary. And so I plugged out of those and I tried, and I just decided to find what worked. Care coordinator at the hospital, at his pediatrician's office, who was like my lifeline. She told me, and I felt like we almost met, like at a pediatric appointment, and she was like my lifeline. She gave me so much, so many resources, and she, I felt like she was my friend. She would call me up and tell me about things I would never have known about. And it wasn't always the big things, but it was things that were helpful. And even just knowing that I could call her and find out. And so that was it. That was very helpful for me. I was connected to PATH in Connecticut, which is, I believe, a state affiliate organization to National Family Voices. So it's part of a bigger network. And I spoke to, I think she's on the board of the she's the vice president, I believe, in city. And that's the lady who really set me on on the best course of healing, I believe. I was much more empowered when I spoke to her. So what they mainly do is empower caregivers to achieve family-centered care for the children and youth in their care, people with special needs and special healthcare needs. So they help us with getting the tools and information to be better advocates for our children. And that for me was something that that was missing all this time, being able to advocate for my son with information. So what Path does is really empower you with information and tools in whatever sense that, whatever makes sense for you at that time. They pair parents or caregivers with people who perhaps have the same kind of diagnosis or kind of situation, and only if you're comfortable with that kind of discussion. After I spoke to the lady that I spoke to, I think maybe a few weeks into that, I was paired with another parent whose son had the same diagnosis. At that time, he was 22. And I mentioned that I spoke to her, the first lady, for like 2 hours. I think I was on the phone for 4 hours, and I cried and I laughed, and it was just the most liberating, most joyful, most real of conversations. Because then she's telling you, you're still crying. Oh yeah, you'll still be crying at 22. I was like, oh my goodness, it doesn't end, But it was also joyful because she was telling me it's not all bad. It was almost like a light, because when you see some of the groups, I mean, the groups that I had been a part of, you don't know the whole story because you can't put the whole story there. They try, and everybody finds help, listens or communicates differently. I think I communicate better with longer conversations that way, and it was very helpful. I found it very empowering that the things that she had been able to do for her son, the advocacy she had done, and it made me actually want to do what she did, to speak to parents who are in the situation that we find ourselves in. So speaking to her, and her son at that point was 23, and he worked in the theater, and he had all these things, and he was just doing amazing. But more importantly, how strong she sounded, how hopeful she sounded, was the most empowering thing I did. We felt some discrimination, and I mention this not because it's happened often, but it has happened. It happened, and it affected our ability to get help. It was regarding some interventions that we thought he needed. And at that point, as I said, I didn't really know how to advocate for a lot of things, even though I could see it. And all the other doctors thought this was something that he needed, but getting the answers that we got from this particular specialist, the dismissive tone, the dismissive attitude, the words that were used, it was horrible. I'd leave the office and cry tears of anger all the way home. And that was difficult. And as I said, it wasn't all bad, because he's fortunate enough to be going to different hospitals, the team in Boston who were providing the same equipment, the same care, different care, gave us a reference to the specialist there who was able to, as soon as he saw him, he said he needs this immediately. And my kids are doing great. We were eventually permanently reunited during the pandemic. For the first lockdown was difficult because they were so far away, and it was so scary that when will I see them, so we decided that, we would push through at that time and see how we do. And so we were reunited, and they're in school, and they're thriving, and they love their brother, and, they're his best advocate. He's thriving. He's the most chatty boy. He's so friendly. He's made so many friends for me, especially that I was depressed for a long time. So he was just like making friends for me, and he's doing well. I'm so grateful for all the doctors. He has a team of doctors in Connecticut, in Boston, who have been so dedicated, so fantastic. I'm in a much better mental state, but I think that a lot of it started my journey. People get frustrated by different things. For me, it was just not knowing, not being empowered. Sometimes it's just purely emotional, but for me, I think it was just not knowing what I can do, and being able to start the journey to it. I mean, you don't learn everything at once, but you know how to go about different things. You speak to people who are stronger or who appear stronger at that point, who are in a better position to help you. That really helped me, and I love that I'm able to help other people now. Helping other people is also empowering, because then you don't feel helpless. Being able to help anyone else is a good thing. I think as human beings, we are all fashioned to serve in whatever way. And if you're able to do that, not just for your family, but for other families, we're all better for it. I think that the mental health of the caregivers is something that is not talked about often, and they also don't, and a lot of the time the caregivers they don't feel that they should, because it seems so secondary to what we're dealing with. Because I think if the parents are thriving, their children will thrive better. They'll thrive better. They'll be more attentive. They'll be, a better energy. I think when you're in a good state, you're able to, as much as you can, maintain a good state around your child, and that's very important. Even for parents, I know that it's probably difficult. No, it's not probably, it's absolutely difficult when you get a diagnosis, but it's very important that we're able to take the time to read, to empower yourself and know what it is you're seeing. I know it sounds a lot easier than done, but you have to, because you are the one who will see what's happening. You'll see changes, you'll see, and you've got to be keener than you would I don't want to call them a child who doesn't have the special healthcare needs. You've got to be keener and be on top of things. So as much as possible, that information that was thrown at you at the time of diagnosis, it's hard, but find a way to read it, or demand for somebody to sit down with you when you're ready and have them speak to you. That is something that you're able to demand for, and they must provide to you. You must find somebody who will provide it to you. Another thing that I found is that there's a lot of, how should I put it, assumptions that you know and you don't know. People just assume you'll find your way in this field, you'll be able to find transportation and all this. It's not like that. So maybe the parent should be able to list the things that they have questions about or worries about, or, and demand that somebody sits down, and somebody will. I don't know what setup that you're in, but if you ask for it, you will eventually get somebody sit down with you, ask your pediatrician, ask your specialist, and just say, I want somebody to walk through this with me at my pace, and ask. Sometimes we're very polite. You don't want to seem like you're inconveniencing, or you don't want to seem dumb by asking too many questions, but it's for your child's benefit. It's for the person in your care. Kind to yourself. Because your child has special healthcare needs or has a disability, doesn't mean that you completely disappear. Find things that work for you. Find places to find joy. It could be reading a book. It could be taking a walk. It could be taking a nap, whatever it is. Exercising. I found that, that was very helpful for me. Whatever it is, just make sure that you don't completely lose yourself or lose the things that give you a spark. And that goes for every parent, but I think particularly for a parent going through such a hard situation, you've got to find a way, even though it's 15 minutes, you've got to find a way to get the fuel to keep going. Whatever gets your fuel, if it's prayer, if it's meditation, if it's dancing, I wouldn't say if it's alcohol, but find healthy ways, find healthy ways to keep it moving.